I finished replacing that big old 3-suction electrolytic. There's a new terminal strip. We had 3 new electrolytics, 2 big guys and 1 little one. I did run new wiring all up. For ground, common ground, right to this lug through the mounting bracket. Then I wanted to make sure it was really good connection, so I cleaned an area on either side of the bracket. I cleaned the chassis and soldered it right on there, so should be a good ground connection. And then I proceeded to kind of work my way around the chassis. So we got some parts tucked in up here. 3 150K resistors in series. Those form a feedback loop for the horizontal oscillator. So picks a signal off of the flyback, comes down. 3 150K resistors in series through a capacitor. Kind of mixes with the incoming signal and goes to the horizontal oscillator. They put them in series because a 1 watt resistor has a breakdown voltage of I think around 400 volts. Put 3 in series, they can handle 1200 volts. Capacitor hiding under here, that couples a horizontal signal to the yoke from the flyback. And there's a cap up here that needed to be replaced. So they just kind of stuck parts in any and every which way. Replaced the fusible resistor here. And let's see, is there anything under here? Oh, no, I don't think so. On this side I just cleaned up the wiring. Cleaned up real nice. Most of the wiring has in general. Originally everything was just kind of like gray, same color, but cleaned it up good. You can see on the CRT socket here that all these wires are actually fairly colorful. So that leaves the side. Working down in here, it's about all I've got left is this section here. So I just pulled this big old 0.5 microfarad cap out. It was down in here. I went to look to see what could I replace it with. Well, got a 0.47 at 630. And here's one at 400. I just want to give you some idea of, with modern technology, how the caps have gotten smaller. Here's a 250, so I could use this. Considerably smaller and slightly higher voltage rating. It'd work great. Then I saw I had a bunch of these in my parts bin. Well, it's got 474 on it, which means it is 0.47 microfarad, but no voltage rating, so I wasn't sure what this was rated at. So I looked up the order I placed with Mauser when I got these. It turns out these are rated for 450 volts. So this cap is actually higher rated than that. But look how small it is. So they're really making some progress with these. That's a Panasonic. It's a new line the Mauser just started carrying. I just wish they had the voltage rating on it. It turns out if you look up the data sheet, it's the 2W. The 2W means 450. Go figure. It has no connection to me, but internally that code of 2W means 450 volts. So, although I could go with this, these are kind of expensive. So I like to reserve these for restuffing on a more valuable set. So I'm gonna go with that guy. Replacing those big old caps down in this area has really opened things up. And here's something kind of curious. A green device. It's upside down, but it says 1N60 on it. And it has a little diode symbol. That is an early germanium diode. That is used in the sync circuit. And there's another one, I believe, hiding inside of this can as a video detector. You can see them on the schematic here. There's the detector. And there's one in the sync circuit. So, in the home stretch now, we have 2, 3, 4 caps left maybe, and one of which is buried in here. Impossible to get at with the controls in place, so I had to carefully bend back these metal tabs to free up a piece of material here that held the pod in place. Once I took the nut off of that, I was able to push it out of the way, and I think I can just get down in there. kind of an odd way to construct this because it's not actually attached to anything. There's no terminal strips done in there or anything. It's just floating in free space. One end goes to the strap that goes around the collar on the potentiometer, and the other end goes to ground. It's 220K and a .01. I'm guessing that actually, no, I'm not sure. I was going to say that goes between chassis ground and circuit ground, but in this case they're one and the same. So, oh, let's see. All right, so that is C73. Okay, it took me a while to find it, and I was sort of right. It goes between the chassis ground and various metal surfaces that are kind of floating. That's the bleed off any charge that builds up. So in other words, this is a hot chassis set. This metal frame here may very well be connected to hot, depending on which way you plug in the unpolarized AC cord. And as I mentioned earlier, there are plastic feet on this to keep that from touching the metal cabinet. Well, the metal cabinet, these pot controls, various other metal surfaces that you may come in contact with, those can build up a charge. So this little RC combination here will bleed that off. Alright, I managed to replace that resistor and capacitor down under there and get everything reattached. And now I'm working on this, which I think they call the horizontal shape control. I noticed it was loose. Well, it turns out that it had broken off of this mounting piece here where you can insert a adjustment tool to change the slug in there. So I'm carefully unsoldering the wires that will allow me to not only hopefully reattach this more securely, but also replace that capacitor. I used a little 5-minute epoxy to glue that coil back in place. So that's it for this, the main side. Actually, I guess that's it for the whole recapping. Pretty sure I'm done with everything. So I then checked the tubes, and they were almost all bad, or a couple were broken and one wasn't the right type. So the ones that were still good were the most common ones, of course: 17 DQ6, 17 AX4 damper, high voltage rectifier. The rest, I searched and dug through my stock and found most of them. The two that I could not find were the two that were broken in the tuner. So I ordered a couple of each off of eBay, and they should be here in a day or two. In the meantime, I will start putting this back together. I cleaned all the tube shields and high voltage cover with Evapo Rust, so those are looking nice. And let's see, I need to reinstall the yoke. The seleniums I'll hang on to. When the set's all done and working, I'll reinstall them. So they look kind of nice, I think. Nice and bright red. And I need to recoat the flyback, so that I will do before calling it quits tonight. I was thinking about maybe I should just remove the whole flyback to coat it. So there's two nuts holding it on down here. I'd have to unsolder the two filament wires to the rectifier tube. And undo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wires. I guess I have no choice because the main chunk that broke off is on the underside, and that's going to be next to impossible to recoat that because of the chassis being in the way. It wasn't too hard to get the fly back out. The main hassle I find with removing stuff like this is this old plastic insulated wire they use. When you heat it up, the insulation starts going gooey very easily. So I try to keep my soldering iron temperature as low as possible and work as fast as possible to get these wires off. Because these are high voltage wires and I don't want to have to replace them if I don't have to. Alright, so here it is. You can see how small this thing is. Something else curious I find is that the wire they used for the high voltage secondary, it's really thick. It's a much larger gauge than I'm used to seeing. Which means the turn ratio can't be all that high. Oh, unless the primary has very, very few turns on it, I suppose. Oh, that's right. This doesn't have a primary and a secondary. It's just all one coil with some taps. So that could account for it. So they must have a more current than they typically would when there's a separate primary and secondary. So that's good because it means that I don't have to worry too much about accidentally just brushing against it and snapping a really fine wire. That's pretty rugged stuff. Alright, so you can see most of the coating is flaked off. I did touch my soldering iron to this and it does melt fairly easily. It's not wax though, or at least it's not your typical beeswax, that's for sure. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I'll chip a little bit more off, but around where the high voltage lead is, I think I'll leave it alone. I'll just kind of melt it and make sure it's on there good because I don't want this to start unraveling or have that high voltage wire break loose. I recoated the flyback earlier today and it's set up well enough that I can reinstall it. I used rt2o4 and I found out that a little isopropyl alcohol on your fingertip allows you to smooth it out quite nicely without it sticking to you. I reinstalled the flyback, wired it in, installed the high voltage rectifier, put most of the cage back on. I figure I'll leave this little door off for now so I can monitor what's going on inside there. Then I started to populate the tubes. I want to put the shields back in, put what tubes I have in, and in anticipation of these tubes arriving, hopefully tomorrow. And then I can fire this set up. Well, one thing I hadn't checked all this time is these controls. Now this is a variable coil, seems to be okay, but the rest of these, that sounds horrible. That sounds even worse, and this one's completely frozen. So, boy, maybe it'll work to some extent, even if these are completely open, but I think at some point I'm going to have to unmount those and do something about it. Now these won't be as bad as those Zenith Bug Eyes for those of you who may have watched that series, because those pots were mounted in a very confined space. They were right up against the top of the metal chassis and they pointed up, and then very short shafts and a similar mounting system though. But these that are on the back, I don't even have the back for this side. I have a lot more leeway. These are all just single potentiometers, so no crazy ganged multi-suction complex anything. So if I want to get these out, just have to untwist two tabs, disconnect the wires on the other side, pop these out, pop new ones in, and it won't be too bad, I think. I mean, even if these are somewhat salvageable, these outer ones, I might just replace them anyways if I got something on hand, just, to get some nicer controls on them. But I'll keep my fingers crossed that they're good enough that I can proceed without them. So I've got all the tubes and shields. I'll populate all this side, and these are the only two that I'm waiting on, the two that go into the tuner. In the meantime, I'll do what I can. I can reinstall the yoke, and there's this wire. I'm not quite sure what it goes to. It's kind of hanging loose. I think it goes to the spring which grounds the aquadag on the pitcher tube, which does not go to chassis ground. I think that's what that's all about, but I gotta double check. Let's see. They should have the schematic. Sort of. They show it there with the little ground symbols, but those look like the same symbols as that. Okay, I think it's this. Remember, there's that resistor and capacitor. They're hiding down in there. They go between the control housing and the chassis. I think that wire, I'll trace it out, let's see. Goes right through here, down into there, and... Okay, it goes right to here. Okay, so it is going to that network. Alright, okay, mystery solved. So that does go to the spring and the cabinet to bleed off any charge that might build up. Alright, so... Yeah, I mean, other than those two tubes and hopefully those controls I can manage with. I think it's all systems go, and I got to reinstall the speaker too. Unfortunately, my tubes still haven't shown up. It's Saturday now, so the soonest they could possibly show up would be Monday. So I got some time to kill. So I'm gonna just go ahead and take a closer look at these pots, see if I can salvage them, otherwise look around for some replacements. So, top one, vertical hold. Unfortunately got clipped off on the somatic, so I'm not sure what the value would be. Let's see about height. Okay, height's 5 meg. Not the most common value, but hopefully I've got something like that. Brightness 100K, very common. I'm sure I've got something close enough. Let's see if I can find the center portion of the schematic. Maybe it shows the value on that control. Oh, there it is, 500K. That's a pretty common value too. So 100K, 500K, and 5 meg. So this one's frozen, and these two sound terrible. Oh, that's handy. They're mounted on a little sub-assembly, so I can take these two nuts off and loosen them up. Otherwise, I thought I was going to have to dig down in there and try to somehow unsolder those lugs. Just removed 2 screws and unsoldered this little tab here that's holding this piece of cardboard insulation. And I pulled back on this plastic tube at the bottom that hooked onto a coil down here, so now I can kind of get at it well enough to unsolder those few wires, that's for sure. It looks like they only use 2 lugs on the top 2, the center and one on the outside, and all 3 on the bottom one. I got the controls out without too much trouble. So I got nothing to lose, so I'll certainly try to salvage these. So I'm going to spray some deoxits. See if that helps out. And of course, I'll test them now. The frozen one, let's see. It's a slot in the back, so I'm pretty sure that turns with the control. Yeah, so. Oh, I can see these are rusty. Nice. There we go. Nice. Rust and crap in there. So I'll spray some deoxit in there. See if that helps any. Suppose I could try submerging these in some evapo rust. They say it won't harm anything. Get that rust out of there. Deal is you spray some in, rotate the control a few times. Wow, that sounds horrible. And then let it sit for a little while and then flush it out with another spray. will I get lucky? Let's see. So there's one extreme, about 0 ohms, 20 ohms close enough to 0. So this would be the 100K, I'm guessing. It does indeed seem to be alright. I can watch this bar graph as I rotate it. It goes back and forth. Don't seem to be any dead spots. One down, 2 to go. This is when it was frozen. Okay, this would be the 5 meg, so you're about 4.6 meg. Probably good enough. Seems to be okay too. Alright, one to go. It should be 500K. Yeah, good enough. Yeah, don't have to go up into the attic and hunt around through my old controls after all. Excellent. I'll clean these up a bit more and remount them, wire them back in. And, well, and I guess I'll just put this on the side for now, because until those tubes show up, can't really do anything with it. And I'll switch over to another project for a couple days.